So whether you are stuck at home or you are just feeling like you need a mental break from everything that's going on, this is the video for you. So today's project is intentionally simple, low stakes, but very creative. Hello, my quilty friends. It's Stacy of Stacy Creates Stuff. And today I want to talk about when you don't have the bandwidth to get involved in the projects that you've been working on, but you still want to quilt. For me, quilting and sewing are, well, they're a haven. And that's partly why I named my current quilt along Haven, because I find a lot of solace in sitting at the sewing machine and listening to the hum of the stitches as I sew along. I've been not totally stuck at home, but haven't been really excited to go outside in the sub-zero temperatures. And I've been wanting to sew. I have plenty of projects that I need to be working on, but the world feels a little heavy right now, and I just don't have the bandwidth to think about the projects that I need to get done. Sometimes it's not that you don't want to work on a project. I certainly want to work on the things that I have. I just don't have the bandwidth for it today. Often when your mind is tired, structure can help. Repetition helps. Doing something that's familiar helps. So instead of just pushing through or walking away entirely, mistakes tend to happen if I push through too much, then I am just going to make a project that takes little thought. I decided that I was going to raid my stash, which I don't touch that often, and pick out a bunch of fabrics that all go together. I stuck within a color family with a couple of little pieces that will highlight a little light, a little dark, and then mostly mediums, to cut into strips. Now, if you want to do this project as well, you can raid your stash. I happen to have some yardage of fabrics behind me, but you can also use scrap pieces. I wouldn't go terribly tiny, not for this particular project, but if you had leftover fat quarters or leftover pieces from a fat quarter or some narrow strips of yardage left over from a project, that will all work. I, at the most, used 10 inches of a fabric, and that was only one of the fabrics. Otherwise, I use less than that for all the strips that I cut. The idea is that you don't think too hard. If you start second guessing yourself, just go with your gut. Close your eyes, take a deep breath, and just pick some fabric. Like me, you probably have some fabrics that have been in your stash for a while. The strips can be any width that you want. I cut strips from 2 inches up to 5 inches. That larger size, that 5-inch, happened to be a fabric that has some beautiful butterflies on it, and I wanted to make sure that I had enough of a butterfly in the strip. But otherwise, I kind of let the fabric dictate how wide it needed to be. If it was a small all-over print, I cut those narrower. Things that had larger prints, I cut those wider. You really can't go wrong. Because I didn't want to sew the entire width of fabric strip to each other, I wanted them to be in smaller increments. I went ahead and cut each strip, not only in half, I cut it in half again. And I wasn't worried about selvage. I didn't even take the time to trim off the selvage. You certainly could. But as we all know, for quilters, the width of fabric varies enough that they wouldn't have all been exactly the same length anyway. Once I had these shorter segments, I went ahead and started just randomly grabbing 2 at a time and sewing them together in pairs until I had 6 pairs going. And then I decided that that was what I was going to start with, and then I was just going to add to those pairs. So I grabbed that first pair off and I sewed a 3rd strip on, and I continued just kind of cycling through, taking off the end one and sewing on a new strip, and just kept on going. I didn't even stop to press. I didn't worry if my seams weren't perfect. Actually, I never worry if my seams are perfect, but worried less this time. Now, in this process, which I found to be quite grounding, I just loved grabbing a piece of fabric, sewing it on, grabbing a piece of fabric, sewing it on. Not a whole lot of thought. I would occasionally kind of look at the piece that I had going and say, oh, it needs something that's lighter or something that's darker or something to break up the rhythm. And I would grab an appropriate piece of fabric from my pile of strips. Now, I just kept sewing until I ran out of strips. And again, I cut about 2, sometimes 3 strips off of each of the fabrics. And I think I had 8 or maybe 9 fabrics, no more than that. And I came away with some big pieces of new fabric. I didn't start this process with a finished project in mind. About halfway through, I thought, I think one of these would make a really great table runner. And of course, you could just trim the sides of this to make them even and call it a table runner. But the creative me wants to do something a little bit more. And I have 5 other pieces of, well, new fabric that I'm going to think about what I can do with those. I will follow up with another video of what I do with these pieces of fabric that I have made. But for today, that is enough. Not every quilting session has to be about advancing your current project. Sometimes just sitting and sewing for the sake of sewing is enough. Today, quilting is self-care. You showed up, you made stitches, and you gave yourself some quiet in this very noisy world. And that's enough for today. And if you need a video to watch or play in the background as you sit and sew, why not check out this?